Hello, everybody. Today, I'm going to go back in the time machine and talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart, and that's 60s pop music, and in particular, American 60s pop music. To get a grasp on it, we have to go all the way back to really when Buddy Holly's plane went down, and as Don McLean wrote, the day the music died, because a lot of people thought rock and roll was a short-lived phenomenon. And you had, of course, Elvis and Little Richard and Chuck Berry and Fats Domino and Buddy Holly and the Everly Brothers, who really kicked off rock and roll in the mid 50s. Buddy Holly's plane goes down in 59. Elvis goes in the Army. Chuck Berry and Little Richard are sort of, their careers are detailed a little bit by some offstage scandals, either allegations that were founded or unfounded, but their careers definitely hit the skids. Same with Jerry Lee Lewis. All those founding fathers put a scare into the music industry, like what's going on. And then we had a dead period in the early 60s. Everything was getting kind of placid before the Beatles kicked off the British invasion. It was very middle of the road, very vanilla, let's say. I mean, you did have the Beach Boys, and you had some doo-wop, and the Four Seasons, and Roy Orbison was around, and of course Motown was in its early stages, and that was outstanding. And from there, the Beatles, of course, in '64 led the charge, and all the bands came over from Britain, and they dominated the charts along with Motown. That was pretty much what was happening in the mid 60s. But the stuff I'm talking about today is the American side of it, not the British groups, not the Motown groups, not the R&B artists such as Aretha and James Brown and Wilson Pickett and Otis Redding. They're all terrific, and we'll do another video on that aspect of music as well. But in 60s pop, the American kids, they wanted something of their own to hold on to. You have to remember, back in those days, there was no Spotify, obviously. There's no MTV. There's no Don Kirshner's rock concert in the 70s, or there's not a midnight special. What you had was, on Saturdays, American Bandstand and AM radio. That's it. And of course, you got all your music on AM radio. You go out and buy the 45s. Really can't afford to buy albums when you're a kid. In the mid 60s, I'm 10, 11, 12 years old. I couldn't swing albums, so I'm buying 45s with my allowance or whatever. And the stuff that I'm drawn to is the AM pop music coming out. So I got a dozen bands, groups, whatever you want to call them, I'd like to showcase today. And most of these go from like 65 to 69. Music changed, and the 70s brought in a whole new sound, and these artists their careers were shot. So let's start out with, I just want to give a little credit to another channel on in the VC, and that's JT's Record Room. The guy's out in Reno, Nevada. He happened to mention on one of his videos about the guy I'm going to start out with, growing up and listening to this stuff. And I said, you know what? Nobody ever talks about this stuff anymore. So I'm going to do a quick little video, and because I love all this stuff. And it's Tommy James and the Shondells. Now, who are they? Well, they had a string of 7 top 10 hits, several number 1 hits, things like Hanky Panky, Mony Mony, I Think We're Alone Now. You know, it's pop, it's sophomoric, but it was all over the radio, and the kids like myself ate this up. They moved into the late 60s, and they got a little bit of a psychedelic pop thing going with Crimson and Clover, Crystal Blue Persuasion, Dragging the Line, Sweet Cherry Wine. These are all big hits. Tommy James, that come out of Niles, Michigan. Very successful group. Next, out of Chicago, Illinois, the Buckinghams, another group that had their moment in the sun, and they kicked it off with a hit called kind of a drag. Good pop record. They called it Sunshine Pop. It made you feel good. You turn the radio. It's a 3-minute record. They also followed it up with "Hey Baby." They're playing our song, the one you used to hear when we used to get along. "Don't You Care" was another song, and "Susan." So the Buckinghams, I want to give props to them. They were teenagers when they came out as well. Next up, TheGrassroots. TheGrassroots were formulated in Los Angeles. I don't believe in the beginning they played their own instruments. They had the Wrecking Crew on a lot of the sessions, and these guys would do the vocals. They were all kind of good-looking guys, and it was very. They were in 16 magazine. It was definitely formulated for the teeny boppers. But Let's Live for Today, Midnight Confessions, a great song. Sooner or Later, I'd Wait a Million Years, Temptation Eyes, all familiar songs by TheGrassroots, and I like this band a lot. Next up, of course, we've got the Turtles. Now, the Turtles, also an LA group, 2 lead guys here, Mark Volman and Howard Kalin, who later changed their names to Flo and Eddie, and they were part of the Frank Zappa and Mothers of Invention crew. They broke in '65 with a Dylan cover, "It Ain't Me, Babe," a pop version of it, not a folk version. Of course, their big hit was "Happy Together." "Imagine Me and You," "I Do," "Happy Together." Classic 60s pop. They also had "She'd Rather Be With Me," "Eleanor," and "You Showed Me." Those were all hits in the late 60s. So the Turtles, they had their moment as well. Next up is Paul Revere and the Raiders. They were a little bit different, more of a garage pop rock oriented group. They're out of Oregon. They dressed up in Revolutionary War costumes. That was their shtick. They had a teen idol in Mark Lindsay, who was their lead singer. And they had their share of hits as well. Never had a number 1 hit, but they were in the top 10 consistently. Kicks and Hungry and Oh, Just Like Me. They had about 10 top 20 hits until they burned out in the late 60s as well. Mark Lindsay had a hit in '71 with Indian Reservation, Cherokee People, Cherokee Tribe. So Proud to Live, So Proud to Die. That was another. They dropped the Paul Revere part. It was just called the Raiders, and Mark Lindsay was really the main cog on that. Then we have the Monkees. The Monkees were absolutely huge for about 3 years. They had their own television series. Of course, they're notorious for not playing their own instruments. And they were formed by, I guess, Don Kirshner was involved with that. And they were actors who were goofballs, and they built songs around them. Of course, Neil Diamond and Carole King and her husband Jerry Goffin wrote some of the songs. So they had 3 number 1 hits: "Last Train to Clarksville," "I'm a Believer," and "Daydream Believer." Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, Peter Tork, Mike Nesmith, the Monkees. Absolute phenomenon at the time. They were the American answer to the Beatles. That was with the mop top and the haircuts and everything else. And they wore the turtlenecks, and they had it all going on. Put out a lot of merchandise, lunch boxes, and little monkeys, Hot Wheels, and there's all kinds of stuff they got out selling there. Now, the Mamas and the Papas. This had 2 men, 2 women, and they had their own. They were folk oriented. In Greenwich Village, moved to L.A. They came out running with a big hit called "California Dreamin'," written by John Phillips and sung by all 4 of them. Perfect harmonies. Cass Elliot, of course, was a lead singer on a lot of their songs, but all 4 of them could sing. John Phillips was a decent songwriter and promoter, founder of the group. He had his other issues, which I don't want to get into now, which were disgusting, but anyway, for the 3 or 4 year period, the Mamas and the Papas were all over. Monday, I saw her again last night. Words of Love, Dedicated to the One I Love, Creek Alley, Dream a Little Dream of Me, on and on. Great songs. And then we have the Fifth Dimension. They were a black quintet, 3 men, 2 women, 1 married couple in there. They did R&B, pop, and psychedelic soul. They came out in '66 with Up, Up, and Away. You had Stone Soul Picnic, Aquarius, Let the Sunshine In from the musical Hair, Wedding Bell Blues, written by Laura Nyro, One Less Bell to Answer, Last Night I Didn't Get to Sleep at All. Very appealing music, middle of the road for sure, but successful. And you turn on the radio in '66, '67, '68, you're going to hear the Fifth Dimension constantly. Next up, The Association. This is another LA group, folk in orientation, folk pop, great harmonies, fantastic arrangements, another pleasant sounding group of men. I guess it was about 7 of them. They played their own instruments, as I recall. They had a song called Along Came Mary, a couple number ones, Cherish, Windy, Never My Love. Real good group here. And they fizzled out as well. They were 2-3 years and gone. Then we've got the Box Tops, another top 40 phenom. They're out of Memphis, Tennessee. Their lead singer, Alex Chilton, was 16 years old. He had a real soulful voice, called it Blue-Eyed Soul. Later, he formed a group called Big Star in the 1970s that had a cult following. But they came out of the gate running with a hit called The Letter, which was later covered by Joe Cocker. And, of course, Cry Like a Baby and Soul Deep were their other big hits. But outstanding sound at that time, the Box Tops. Next up, Hall of Famers, the Rascals. They were originally the Young Rascals, dropped that a year into their career and became the Rascals. They're out of Garfield, New Jersey. And again, they hit the ground running with a hit called Good Lovin', went right to the top, number 1. Followed it up with Groovin', and had some other hits like I've Been Lonely Too Long. How Can I Be Sure, which is a beautifully sung song. People Got to Be Free, which was an anthem for the civil rights movement at that time. Awesome group. Bunch of Italian guys here from Garfield, New Jersey. Felix Cavaliere, Dino Danelli, Eddie Brigatti, and Gene Cornish inducted in the Hall of Fame, the Rascals. And last and not least, out of New York City, the Lovin' Spoonful, John Sebastian, lead singer. This is another group that was starting out in the folk era, went into the pop rock. They had a little band here, and they played their own instruments as well. Do You Believe in Magic? You didn't have to be so nice. What a Day for a Daydream. Summer in the City, which was their big number 1 hit. Nashville Cats. And Did You Ever Have to Make Up Your Mind? Real solid. The Lovin' Spoonful. Kind of wacky on stage, jumping around, but they made good music and they hit the charts. And again, if you turn the music on, this is the stuff. These 12 bands or groups, whatever you want to call them, artists in a way, they were dominating the American labels at that time. The British were still riding the wave as well. All the groups that the Beatles led the charge on, of course, the Stones and the Hollies and the Searchers and the Animals and the Kinks, the Who, all these bands from England. Herman's Hermits were huge. Dave Clark 5. They dominated. Motown, incredible 60s music, starting with groups like the Marvelettes and Martha and the Vandellas, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, the Four Tops, the Temptations, the Supremes, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Junior Walker and the All-Stars, and later the Jackson 5. Great time to be a music fan in the 60s before things got a little heavier with psychedelia and acid rock, things like that. I didn't even talk about bubblegum, which is a completely different. This borders bubblegum, but pure bubblegum, different. And that was part of the scene as well. So you could turn on the radio and in let's say '68, and you'd hear the Doors, or you'd hear Cream, or you could hear the Rascals, or you could hear the Monkees, or Motown. It was great. You never knew what you're going to get, and there was so much good stuff at that time. But things would change as it always does. And by 1970, the singer-songwriter movement was coming on, and some of the groups were forming. The prog groups were about to take off, and it was a whole new sound. So anyway, I just wanted to do a video noting some of these forgotten artists who I still have a place for in my heart. And once in a while, I'll throw one of these CDs on and give it a spin, and it takes me back to when I was a kid a long, long time ago. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Take care. Have a good day.